All right, so we're in our ninth review. We've been doing this since Wednesday. Anyway, so I maybe Sylvia, you're like the only one who maybe kind of doesn't remember me too much, but actually we did meet a while ago at
Oh
Morpheus's
yeah, we did
office.
meet.
A long time ago.
I just see the LA Metro behind you.
Yeah, and I ended up in Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I have been teaching here for 15, 16 years. And I ended up moving down here about 11 years ago to run the Cal Poly LA Metro, well, created and run the Cal Poly Metro program. Hi, Ming. Nice to see you.
Stephen, how are you?
Thank you for coming out. It's looks like you're in a nice, cool room too. It's on brick wall behind you. Like, oh, that's your house. Cool. Yeah, it's nice. So I'm just starting the intro, and I'm just going to move quickly so we can all go enjoy our Friday and weekend. So thank you all for being here. The students are fourth year undergrads. It's always good to remember because sometimes their work doesn't seem that way. Sometimes it does. Anyway, they're a fantastic group of students. We have 36 now here in LA. So we've grown and continue to kind of been growing. Maybe COVID had an impact on that because a lot of the international programs were closed. So we picked up some extra students this year, which was super fun. It's a team taught studio, so it's not like your normal studio in that one instructor does everything. I do a lot. I'm the director and I teach design, but I do that as a team effort. Joanna Grant has been teaching with us design, and Menace Lai has also been teaching in the first quarter. We're a 20-week, 2-quarter studio. Ismail Soto has been with us, also teaching design and computation the entire time. Pavel, who everyone I think knows and loves and highly respects, he's been teaching design and practice with us for a while as well. And Teddy Slowick, also teaching design and practice. Fabio Sangoli teaches structures, and Sarah Hearn and Tina Sorio have been teaching history theory. So we kind of do this as a team effort, and it's a wonderful thing. I have to say, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the team. So today from 2 to 4, we have our reviewers. I'm just going to introduce you all. There's Patrick, on time, exactly as I said. Great. Tyler Armstrong is Princeton MArch. You have not graduated yet, have you? You're in the midst.
One more year.
Yeah, enjoy. And he's a former Cal Poly LA Metro person. He's doing fantastic things. I do not doubt over there at Princeton, blowing their minds out of the water, or at least joining in the conversation. Ming Feng from Mithun and also SciArc, really nice to have you here. Victor Jones, Fievra Jones, office, and Cal Poly Pomona. He's, I think you're running the MArch program now, right? Awesome. And Sylvia Coulet of Standard Architects. Great to have you with us. Great company, doing great things. And Patrick Tai, of course, Tai Architecture and USC. Actually, Patrick has some of our students always. We intern our students as well here in Los Angeles for 2 days a week during the entire 20 weeks. And he's always been a supportive person of our students. So we have 4 students for you this afternoon, Kai, Len, Chad, and Karan. And we'll move through them at about 25 minutes each. We'll see if we can keep to that pace. Just to give you an idea of what we're up to, what we did this year, because it changed a little bit than our usual, but fairly similar. We entered into the low-rise competition. We've been doing high-rise, mid-rise housing projects for about 5 years now, and we decided to take on the low-rise that Christopher Hawthorne put forward. All 36 students and the team, we all thought about the project together, and then they all entered in separately. 12 of them entered the competition. Also, Joanna and Jimenez entered in themselves separately. And we're kind of excited that Erica David, one of our students, won honorable mention in redistribution, and Joanna and Jimenez also received honorable mention in subdivision. So it was an interesting and somewhat productive adventure. We then went forward with our typical architectural project where we look at computer solids and computer modeling and trying to teach sort of these skills of studying sort of inside outside, in between spaces, both in section and also trying to imagine those within the site context. We do that to create an architectural interest so that every student has their own kind of project, their own thing, but then finds their way into the program, or gives them at least an architectural language that they can explore separately from site and program. We then have the program. Our programs are often quite big. This one's actually small for us, but it's still quite large. Usually we do about 1.25 million square feet. This one's at 210,000 square feet. It's a low-rise project. And it's a multi-income housing project with a hotel component, a boutique hotel and a transient hotel, as well as a series of social and health services and creative office spaces and retail. There's also a 50% basically the program matching that is also public interior and exterior urban spaces. We'll kind of look at the spaces in between. So if we break down that 210,000 square feet, 60,000 square feet is public and commercial space with all these sort of varied services that you can read there. There's a 50,000 square feet of flexible creative office space and 100,000 square feet of housing and hotel. Hotel breaking down into both a transient component and a boutique component, and a variety from high basically to low income, 50,000 square feet being affordable, which is about half of the housing model. And then there's also transitional family housing. So that ensures really for us kind of a very mixed use multi-income environment, and a lot of diversity within those kind of programs that then the students can think about the spaces in between and how they might design those. And then also there's an underground parking for mechanical. The site we chose is Echo Park. We chose that a while ago before, of course, well, certainly thinking about gentrification as a whole and its impact on Echo Park, but we also, were present and aware of and conversant of the issues surrounding the homeless population in Echo Park Lake, and the recent challenges that the city has had with the way in which they handled that situation. Our location is here. It's a fairly large site. This is Echo Park Ave. This is Sunset Boulevard. Sunset Boulevard, as you're all aware, is a fairly commercial area with a good pedestrian life. And it's gentrifying pretty heavily over up here on this side, but then it's also moving into this territory as well. So we're looking at that corner block, and we've taken that for our site. This kind of gives you an idea of the location, the physical environment. So we're basically taking down the Walgreens pharmacy and the boutique organic food store and considering what those might be as well. We're sticking within a 4-story max general LA standard of 45 feet high. And this kind of gives you the more exact location on the lot, 300 square feet, 300 feet by 320 feet, giving about 110,000 square foot floor plate on the ground plate. Imagine 4 stories. So we're about 220,000 square feet. So that gives you 4 stories, 50% porosity. So just kind of generally the structure, recognizing each student is thinking about an architectural concept with form and material, an urban concept or site strategy, and also having some kind of socio-political agenda that may, of course, relate to their organizational programmatic concept. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn it over to Kai, who is the first student. And there's a concept board that you should have access to. We can put that in the chat as well. Just provides background so you can see what they're doing and you can talk about it later.
Could you all hear me just fine? And am I echoing? Okay, thank you.
You're good.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming out of your way to come review all of us. My name is Kai. I'll be presenting you my project, Social Miscellanea. So Social Miscellanea is a medley kit of parts that proposes a scheme for the community of Echo Park that prioritizes the streetscape, which promotes the intermingling of the public community with the residents, and much like a puzzle assembled based on how each parts fits into one another, the schemes align so that people's needs, programmatic needs, are based on their incomes and opportunities, and they can be aligned with their necessities and workplace. So the formal intent reflects on the narrative attempting to make sense of each geometry, kind of like the assembly block, nesting and connecting with this neighboring components. Um, so to break down the spatial organization in assembly, this is a top-down view of kind of the whole site. And how I chose to approach is that my first intent was to develop an artificial streetscape, which brings the public into the center of the site, which are occupied by the majority of the public program requirements, which are retail, boutiques, cafes, restaurants, for the local businesses, it would stimulate income for the entire community. And so the ground level is comprised mostly, almost entirely out of the public program, which brings to the next point, which is introducing the pocket communities, which I created 3 central social outdoor spaces that allow for social zones to develop, each specialized based on its adjacent program components. So the social zone 1 would be accommodated to high income housing, offices, and boutique cafes. So it has a higher income bracket. The pocket community 2 is towards the regular low and mid income housing, as well as markets for those that also work, have local owned businesses. And the third is the transient homes and hotels, which are aimed to help towards the lower income and people that need transitional housing. And so that's included with a lot of amenities. And so since the public is filled with, or the first level is filled with public programs, I chose to elevate the social zones above to engage privacy and to create a increase public engagement by moving outdoor to the second level and connecting them using a system of arches and pipes. And then the rest is just aligning the parts from the programs with those community hubs. So kind of into that program, as reinstated, the first floor is majorly composed of the public domain, followed by the social zones, which lie right above it. And those are connected via the pipes and fittings that traverse people through the zones and to their go-to workplace or to retail and dining, or whichever that it is. And the third and fourth level is dedicated entirely to housing and the creative office spaces. And there's also remnants of transient hotels and boutique hotels. So looking at the plans, this is kind of just breaking down more of that first floor engagement. This is a view from the Boutique Street, which is the artificial street that I've created that face Sunset Avenue. So this is a pedestrian only kind of walkable street where they would be engaged with a lot of boutiques. And to zoom in a little more on the plans, it's composed so that it's intersection of 3 different streets: the Market Street, the Boutique Streets, and the Commerce Street. And those are lined with their respective programmatic uses. So the boutique would be lined with cafes, boutiques, and those types of programs. And the commerce would be more allocated towards pharmacies and offices, and towards the Market Street would be more for the local owned restaurants, cafes, grocery stores, and etc. And there's also a large cafe on the first floor, which is the closest to the most sociable street, which is Sunset Avenue, which already has a lot of pretty diverse public dining and food vendors. So moving on from that, we'll move to the second floor, which is kind of where these social zones are being introduced. So the 3 primary social zones are shown in here. So the largest one at the bottom is geared towards the more high-end programs, and that includes the high-end housing, some boutiques, and that has the largest spatial allocation so that the public can also be engaged with it, and it's the closest to where people are. The second zone is kind of allocated towards the mid-income and houses a lot of single bedroom, double bedrooms, and their own creative office towards the back. So there's a work to housing relationship. And the third zone is precedented with transient homes, transient housing, and paired with a lot of amenities like gyms, daycares, and pharmacies for those that are in need of those amenities. And so in the next one, in the next floor would be the introduction of those tubes that I mentioned earlier that would connect these zones so that it's not segregated purely by income and programs, so that there's connection on the ground floor with the public domain, and there's connection above via the tubes and pipes. And so the third and fourth floors are kind of similar in a way, because some of the housing are double storied and the creative office space is occupied with 2 levels. So the fourth floor is just an expansion onto the third. And moving on to the section 1 and 2, this primarily just shows sort of a cut through Sunset and Montana, which displays a lot of the tubes and passages, which are one of the fundamental concepts for the project, which traverses people through the different buildings on the site. And the second section kind of shows off the community hubs 1 and 2, which have a very large open to air sunlight outdoor zone. And that's lined around the different programmatic needs like housing and offices. And these are sort of some elevations. So this one kind of shows off the Sunset Avenue elevation, Logan Street elevation, Montana Street, and Echo Park. And for towards the formal discourse of how I kind of arrived at this form is that it's simulated from my previous exploration in the dissimulation project, which is a project we did earlier this quarter, or yeah, earlier in this program. And that got me to explore a lot of the formal geometries and how each form can inspire a certain movement or use. And so I try to allocate those to the current programmatic usages, such as the pipes for passage and the arches for a place of shelter. And that's all I have for this presentation. So I'll just flip over to my concept board.
Can you show us the elevations one more time, a little bit zoomed in, please? Yeah.
So this is 2 elevations,
Mm-hmm.
Sunset and Logan, and then this is the Montana and Echo Street, Echo
Mm-hmm.
Park.
And I'm just going to start off. I find it was really easy to follow your explanation, and it's like a really clearly organized student designed concept. So I really think it's I like how you must have edited out your thoughts and decided on one out of many choices. And then and the zoning is clear, and what my question is about, or maybe where I think you could explore further, is it is a very, you basically bring in private spaces very densely together to create these public spaces and the interaction with the city. And I think everything is organized to do that. And then where my question lies is how the actual facades, you know, how much penetration or closure do these various facades need to support what is behind them? So I think maybe being more conscious that maybe a more, or like a more public area might want to be more of glass and doors and operable versus maybe a private zone can be a little bit more closed. For this to work, and it's probably maybe because it's early in the project, but I don't, that's why I have questions, you know, if that could be explored and pushed further than you did.
Hey, I'll jump in. Great to be here today. Great work. Really good to see everybody. You know, I really like this project. I think oftentimes we see work in the housing realm that's either very prosaic or very conceptual, right? And I think this project does a good job of addressing both. There's a certain kind of rigor and thoughtfulness that went into all the plans that seems to work. I guess my comment would be that like I think the project could be stronger if it probably were more conceptual or more prosaic. It's kind of like halfway between the two. And what I mean by that is the beauty of these tubes and pipes are wonderful, but then I question, okay, well, what do they really do? Why are they occupying so much real estate? It seems to me like they need to do more other than being kind of this, you know, beautiful formal move. So that would be a comment. You know, we all know housing is very formulaic, right? And there's a certain percentage that goes into circulation and the whole bit, right? And we don't need to go there because we value and we appreciate the poetic nature of the project. But I think that that could be pushed, right? So in the end, it's not just a beautiful form, but it is that, but it's so much more. And I think it kind of needs to be, especially if you're taking on housing with, you know, all of this kind of stuff built into it. So I guess that would be my major comment. I love the project. I think it's beautifully rendered in many ways. I guess my comment or criticism, I guess, would be that I would like to see those things having more value and wanting to know more about what they are, how they work, and how they really contribute to the project, other than just in a kind of beautiful formal way. But it's a beautiful project.
I'd like to follow up on some of Patrick's comments. The tubes and pipes, so you called them fittings, really fascinated me. There's one elevation where they kind of break the datums, because the project's so well thought out in a planimetric sense, but I feel it could really benefit for additional exploration in ways of breaking down the kind of rigidity of your horizontal datums. And the tubes, the fittings, even the arches could be a really powerful device to do that. So I'd be interested, moving forward or just in some alternate version to let it be a little more free, to respect the datum less and allow other parts of the project to have a little more say, perhaps even kind of push around some of the programmatic elements, which you seem to hold in a quite sacrosanct fashion, which is good. You understand the importance of having the right amount of space, putting them together. But I do think that the project would benefit from breaking some of those systems, perhaps just in a incidental way, just so that there's a little bit more spontaneity in the system. Because there's a lot of forms, but when you really start to understand the project, its governing logic comes through and then becomes a little strong as you start to see it being played out on level after level. So more sectional exploration, I think, would really help what is already a super well thought out project.
everybody seems to like your project, so I don't think I want to be the exception. I'm just I've been looking at your board, and I really like the way you were describing your project in a highly organized and structured way, and I appreciate that. Particularly, I like I like the diagram when you explain the program organization and those kind of um, um, uh, figure ground diagram for the circulation and the nesting and the piping. It explained your project really well. But one of the things that I was hoping to see more, because clearly you can design the project. Your plans are very beautifully drawn. Was those moments where you separate the um, uh, the program itself, because it's a highly complex project between commercial housing, hotel, which are different from transient housing, different from market rate housing, um, and the office space. So one of the things that I would applaud from it's very impressive for me to see a project with this um, complexity of program being executed so well. Having said that, it's less clear to me how they interact together, because in particular with your project, you have the piping, which is a tube, which is a circulation, and that create moment of interaction and moment of different experience throughout the project, which I would imagine could be very exciting. And I get a little glimpse of that in one of your rendering perspective when you see the tube floating out over the archway. But in a certain way, I think that your project would really benefit from kind of highlighting and emphasizing in how the different programs work together, because I think your project really calls for that. It really calls for the relationship of those things, of how the program work together with the open space, how they're stacked together, how the circulation weave in and out of each section, I would call them, because you have like a quadrant, right? You have 4 quadrants, and how do they interrelate together? And it's a little bit more, it's unclear with the way the project is represented, because I don't think that the floor plan is sufficient to do that. And the section, I think, is difficult to read, although I have to say that they're really quite beautiful.
I'd like to just add to that conversation. I think many of the comments that Ming, Tyler, and Patrick have mentioned are all really pertinent, but I'd like to turn the conversation to what I think is the real brilliance of the project, which is the urban attitude towards the way that you deal with this very deep and thick site. Your intuition to divide the site and make these internal streetscapes, I think is a wonderful idea. I also think the way that you are organizing the project to build a certain degree of programmatic and spatial, experiential complexity is also wonderful. The way these different programmatic elements live in such close proximity to one another, and the kinds of new opportunities for kind of social interaction and kind of mixity of space, I think is really powerful in the project. But I do agree with Ming and Tyler. I think that there is, a question about how the section begins to play a part in that conversation. How does that ground streetscape work with those upper kind of like gathering areas that are on the second floor? What is the connective tissue? I would really love to know more about that. I'd also want to understand better, and it goes back to Patrick's concern about, navigating between kind of the prosaic issues of housing and also the kind of more exciting formal proposition of the project. Is how do you begin to acknowledge the frictions that are going to occur between all of these different kinds of populations that inhabit the site? And I think about, let's say, the kind of transitional housing, which has its, very specific kinds of parameters and constraints and its way that it engages the public or not. And then some of the other programs which are more mainstream and common every day, and how they interface with this very specific type of housing and inhabitant. But I also wonder how that plays out in some of the commercial and public zones as well. And how do you begin to really understand the kind of provocation that you're putting forth in the project, that you are trying to find something that that kind of suppresses this friction or potential social clash, and that the architecture somehow is supporting or being supportive of this kind of mixity. And I just wish I would understand that more from an architectural point of view and an organizational point of view. Lastly, I think if there was a real criticism for me, it is in, well, I think the sectors or the zones, as Ming was talking about, are quite effective in terms of organization of the site. I wonder in real life if they will actually play out in favor of the project's ambition. I'm wondering if that kind of zoning is actually more destructive than productive in the project. And I just think about the kind of organic nature of streets in the city and how they prosper most when there's like more freedom in terms of what can happen where and when, versus like these kind of strict programmatic constraints, like pharmacies can go here only, restaurants can go in the northeast corner only, and whether or not the project would benefit from more mixing up rather than a kind of zoning and isolation of certain things.
Perhaps in the kind of last conference, there's been talk of what are strategies to enliven the section, bring these things together. And it might just be an aside, but if you look at your axonometric 01, 03, there's a really interesting move you make in which there's a kind of Boolean out of the tube and it goes out and becomes an inverse structure of sorts. And that could be simply overly complex, but I think it points to some of the latent potentials you had in your formal study to allow your systems to kind of contaminate and intermingle and better represent the kind of density and heterogeneity the project hopes to achieve. And I think that we're all looking to find it in ways like this simple move of what is inside is then inverted outside. There's a lot of architectural knowledge in how to make that transition, how to keep the curves regular, and then how to fit spaces and programs within it. So if you're going to look back and maybe answer some of our questions, I'd look back at some of your initial formal studies, perhaps, and look back at the site as well and see some of the thoughts you had that might have been placed aside, and they could actually provide some of the answers to the questions we're asking, I think. Because you've obviously produced a lot of work, so the answer's in there somewhere.
I'd be also interested to see, you have a very dense floor plans for the little program areas, like in each store, in each apartment. I see a lot of lines and thoughts, and then the interconnective tissue spaces, they all very empty. And I'd like to see, I have questions, if you would draw more, what happens in those, what would happen with the project in terms of what everybody has criticized or mentioned as like a next step of development.
Thank you. That was a good conversation. I really think it's a great start of the conversation for today. This group, Kai, I'm with Sylvia's first comment that I think your elevational kind of axonometric design is really quite spectacular to look at and kind of enjoyable. And then I of course would agree with everyone else. I mean, the organizational thinking is really nice to see, and it's so clear. Perhaps it's over thought through, but that's, I guess, an interesting conversation we can keep thinking about. For me, it's the ground plane that I think that just got so undercooked. It's just flat, right? And that's really, I think, that space in between that people are saying, if you're going to prove that this is an amazing territory to walk around in, to be part of, the flat plane everywhere is just a little disappointing, I think. And so maybe I would ask you just to look at that in terms of how you draw it in the plan, but also to think about that. It shows up, as I think Sylvia was just kind of mentioning, in every drawing that you render. So it's just the thing you just didn't quite get to, which, by the way, is a typical thing our students have a tendency to do. It's not you, it's a tendency that we try really hard to break, but I don't know what's happening. And Victor's comments are great too. The idea that how do you create a diverse environment of open engagement when at the same time we're trying to program things. So it's lovely to see it. Maybe one day we can talk about arches, and I always have my thoughts about arches and colonialism and imperial ideas that end up in those arcades, and what you might be saying, which you may not mean to be saying, but they're very lovely anyway. So thank you. Great work. Great. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the kind reviews.
Yeah, good critics. All right, let's go to our next student, Len.
Hello. Thank you for coming today. Okay. Poolscapes is a mixed-use housing project in Echo Park that strives to democratize the domestic activity of swimming. It takes the stereotypical concept of the pool from one's backyard and makes it more accessible, both to residents and pedestrians, thus providing an opportunity for people to socialize along with recreation and health development. The topology of the pool is supported by the formal language of the project, along with the choice of facade materials, thereby accentuating the grandiose drama of light and water. These are the initial studies. The first one was Poolitics, and the Poolitics was essentially exploring the segregation of the pools in the US, and particularly in South Central, and was thinking about new typology of housing that could potentially provide a new type of domestic activity for people to rejuvenate and take care of their health. And the second exploration was this dissimulation that essentially worked with primitives and tried to find interesting compositional qualities of the form. So here you can see the section and elevation of the project. This subcellar level is dedicated to the parking garage. And the first two floors are mostly public with some mixes of residential program. On the first floor, we have public service, and to the right, public market with transitional housing above. The third and fourth floors are majorly dedicated to mid to low income housing, and the top floor is dedicated to transient hotel, along with the boutique hotel in the other ward of the building. This is the chunk that shows the overall materiality and the choice of materials and structure of the building. It's mostly concrete construction due to the live loads experienced by the rooftop pools. And for facade choice, for public spaces and first floor, I have stainless steel panels, and for the part that is right above it is GFRC panels. Yeah, and the perforated steel screen. These are the typical unit plans. They're for technically 5 typologies. The mid to low income and transitional typology is the same. The high to low mid income typology is has the same layout, but just a little bit larger, along with boutique hotel and transient hotel. So this is a parking garage plan that shows the overall access to the ground level. These are floor plans 1 through 3, and they're featuring majorly public spaces with some mixes of residential as well. As you can see, the first 2 floors are majorly public market, creative office, media gallery, amphitheater on the ground level as well, and the pools both on the ground level and the rooftop level as well. And the media gallery connects to the residential commons and ties it together. And so on the roof, you can also see like more pools and public spaces that are supposed to bring people together and give them an opportunity to socialize and essentially take care of their health and recreate. This is one of the renders, one of the corner renders that shows the overall materiality and the positioning of the building on the site. This is the rooftop public space that shows essentially where people are supposed to recreate and hang out with each other. And there is an overall idea of like, those rooftop courtyards and pools around as well. And the final render shows the public space next to the ground level pool. It's essentially the plaza that just shows the overall drama of light, form, and water as well. And that's it for now, so I'll turn to my concept board.
Well, I can jump in. There's so much in this project. It's kind of wonderful to look at. I love the idea of the pool and using that as a driver to kind of define your architecture. How wonderful. There seems to be 2 strategies here when it comes to design, right? You're using the sphere as a tool and you're bullying out these spaces with the sphere. And I guess I have a lot of questions. I don't need answers, but I have a lot of questions on it, like how you're doing that, why you're doing it, why is it always just like a semi chunk? There's never a full sphere. There's always a partial sphere. Sometimes it's a pool. Sometimes it creates a coffer or an arch, right? Like I feel like there needs to be more, I don't know, rigor or thought, or we need to know how you do that and why you do it. And I think if there was a little bit more kind of clarity in how you use it, it would make the project more clear and we would understand it more, right? Like it's always used the same way. Like the poche is always the same. The thicknesses of a floor and a wall are always the same, whether it's a building or a pool. But in essence, they would be completely different, right? Because it's two different sensibilities in terms of construction. I don't know. So there's just so many questions there, but I guess my thought or my comment or my criticism will be like, I would just like to see some really simple studies on how you take this sphere and bullion out of a more kind of simple mass to create these conditions, and then explore that as a study and then apply it in a kind of rigorous way, right? So we understand your process. We know where these things come from, and ultimately it makes more sense. And the other thing that threw me for a loop was, okay, this was a lot, doing the whole bullion thing. And then you have this kind of section extrusion, and that appears at the top of the building. You have these tubes that aren't spheres anymore. Now it's more of a cylindrical section that gets pulled out of the building. Yet another kind of like major move, right? So now I have like a million more questions on that and why you do that and what that means. And, you know, together, I think it's just like overload. And I think there's some moments of your project that are so beautiful, right? Some of these corners or these sharpened edges that become soft and rounded, if employed in a more curated way, if used, I think, in a more selective way, the project would be so much more potent. And I'm not taking away from anything that you have done, because I think there's some wonderful things going on. But for me, like a little bit less would be so much more powerful. And I think you'd be able to talk about it in a way that would be more powerful, and we would be able to understand it more. But that's a criticism at a high level. I think, there's some wonderful things going on. I just wish we could focus on some of them or pieces of them. And I'm overwhelmed because there's so much of it at once. It's hard to take in. But if I could just focus on some of these moments, to me, that's the strength of the project.
Well, I would totally agree with Patrick's comments. One of the things that I love so much is the kind of lightheartedness of the humor for a building type that often is completely dominated by economics. And so there's something really fun about the pool, like taking our way from a kind of Excel spreadsheet about what costs what per square foot, and beginning to reconceptualize a project around something that is more joyful and experiential and exciting to be a space-making element that is unique to this project. One of the things I struggle with, and I do agree with Patrick, that I am a little bit skeptical about the pool having such a dominant presence on Sunset Boulevard. And the way that Montana and Sunset are treated so similarly in terms of the organization of the project. And I wonder if that curatorial eye that Patrick is asking for about placing these gems in more strategically important places might be the kind of easing up on the pool as a dominant feature on Sunset. Or if it is on Sunset, how does it begin to, talk about water within the Echo Park area? Does it have a relationship to the lake that's a few blocks away? Does it have a relationship to some of the reservoirs that are in Elysian Park? So wondering if part of that conversation about editing and curating the locations and purposes of these pools might also be about being more specific about their function. Are some utilitarian in the sense that they are collecting precious rainwater? Are they dry sometimes of the year and then wet in others? Could they possibly be some deeper than others and others more shallow? But then beginning to think about those things might offer a counter argument about why there could be a pool on Sunset, for example. So I think there's that wonderful provocation of the pool, but I wonder if they're going to stay alive and not be value engineered out of the project eventually as it pushes towards construction. Is there a way to really anchor them and have them be essential to the project and its architecture?
I'd like to continue the comments on how much pool do we need, too much or too little. I almost think that you need more pool, but you need to look at the pool with a finer grain comb, a closer read, because it seems to be deployed on the ground, on the roof, within a certain kind of Boolean vocabulary. Programmatically, they're simply pools. But I think the pool, or just water in general, as Victor said, has so many connotations, both performative and also symbolic in this specific context. And I think there's a lot kind of left on the table in terms of, say, the ecological concerns. Why are there no plants going out of the disused pools? Why are the pools not at different levels? Can the pools be used for cooling on the inside? Are there teeny tiny little pools? Do the sinks even have a similar vocabulary? So there's a whole vocabulary of the pool or the water in this form that gets established on the site that can do more than simply be a space that you might go into a couple of times a year. I also think that there's a lot of exploration to be done in terms of the pool in Los Angeles, which had a quite varied use history, from a traditional pool to being used for skateboarding, or even the very famous instance of pools on Wilshire with LACMA and Pereira's original scheme, which had all these reflecting pools, which were beautiful for a day, and then the oil and tar from the adjacent La Brea tar pits immediately seeped in and they had to drain them all. And that kind of set into motion the process of eliminating that LACMA, which was completed recently and will be replaced with Zumthor's now kind of cartoonish image of the oil that defeated those pools of water. So I think there's so much in the project, and you had such a coup with electing the water as being a major actor in your architectural narrative. But I think giving it more speaking roles, more screen time, and a more interesting narrative could really help take the project to another level of complexity, and the level of complexity that it needs beyond the visual complexity you've already achieved.
This is what happened when you have one good idea and you didn't exploit it 100%, right? Because that's clearly is what everyone, and I couldn't agree more. It's impossible not to talk about the project without addressing the pool and without wanting it to be doing more than what it does. So I just don't want to repeat and go on with the pool notion, but I wanted to talk, well, maybe with the one exception that I do think that I was hoping and wishing that if you have such a strong notion of using water, that essentially that completely drive the concept of the whole project and the entire way one go through the project, how one perceive the project, because having water at street level may not necessarily mean that it's a landscape and a beautiful feature. It could also connote a mode. It could also connote the idea of not being able to trespass. So that the real notion of water surrounding a building is a defensive way. One does not is very, very difficult to go walk into. And it's interesting because when I look at your project, that was my initial reaction. I said, wow, this is surrounded by a moat. And then I have a very different take on the project because I also see a certain monumentality in terms of how you decided to represent the project with this, gigantic scupper on top, on the roof. So everything about the project has a certain scale. So which I would like for you to address and to talk about from that point of view, because it's also the reason why I'm using the term monumental is because there's also a certain kind of monolithic quality about the project as well, and how the program is being all put together within the same envelope. The cladding is the same, and you just kind of basically stack the hotel first, and then the housing on top of it, and then the last would be the transit, which surprisingly for me occupied the most coveted level of the entire project, which is the top level of of your project. So to me, though, aside from using the pool to drive the concept, I also think that there's something about your project that feels contradictory, has a contradiction with the notion of openness and then of water and asphalty. It feels more hermetically sealed from looking at the exterior and the way you glaze it and the way you kind of address that envelope.
I agree. All the comments made, and one thing which sparked my interest is how generic your section is, almost like a storage unit of putting. Let's carve out a form, and it's really important part of the concept visually. And so I believe it is really an important part of the concept for you. And then the program, you know, however the adjacency is, as long as all the program is in there, and then all of these people can experience my shapes or the building in its all three dimensions, you know, that's important to me. The outside is important to me. The inside is just all of you being in there and then sharing the outside together. And I think that's a really interesting stance, because I think typically you would spend a lot more time of differentiating where these programs are and how they relate to each other and what is right next to each other and what is further away. But maybe for your project, what I see is it's not important. And then, and that leads me to the question a lot of the other jurors ask is like, if that's not important, what, and the water and the pool is important, what is the water doing with the building? How is the water interacting with this whole theme of what water means in California on all these different levels, from drought to pool to history we just got explained, and how does that relate to these different places you create for the people who inhabit your building is my question.
Can you turn to your chunk? Can you zoom in on it? I mean, I have to ask you some questions, Len, because I think you got an interesting review that you might think about for a long time. Because obviously this is, zoom in a little bit more on it, so it really just occupies everything. Let's just say that this was a different project and this was a, I don't know, a hostel or a student, or not even like it was a beautiful dorm or just a single building. The sophistication at this level, I mean, looking at it closely, the way you've managed your glass, the way you've managed your shapes, the ground, the bottom half of the curve, the top half, the spaces in between, the way you've got like a workout room, very small little kind of dorm type rooms and a pool on top. Would have been a lovely building, right? And I think on that level, you really are doing something quite gorgeous. It does have a little Zumthor quality in my mind, but it's really quite attractive, and the way you can draw is beautiful. When you take it, you have a tendency to repeat. So if you zoom out now and you look at your overall building, it takes that one object and it repeats and repeats, mirrors, repeats, doubles, repeats, almost ad infinitum. And I think that's something I want you to think about. The tendency to have a brilliant moment and then just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. You didn't do that. I know you didn't do that. But it's, I think, inherent if we even looked at your earlier low-rise project. There's something in the way in which you design, you find a brilliance and you hold on to that. And I think the nuance is what just kind of gets lost in that mix. I mean, I think the comment from the beginning when Patrick noted that's a beautifully drawn, beautifully articulated, very attractive project, and the political, maybe even just the pool itself is so fascinating, and the way you took it on, then everyone's asking you for 40 different versions to think about. And that's maybe where the research kind of hasn't happened. Not because of you, just maybe because of big, gigantic project, right? This is a big project. And that's, I think, a way you manage the big project. And I would just kind of let you think about that one. And I don't know what the other critics think. I don't know what you thought. Like, what do you think of this review? Because it's probably not what you anticipated.
No, that's what I anticipate in general.
Hey, Stephen, I would love to maybe throw something on the table. I think Lynn has a beautiful job of working at another scale of design interrogation, which is at the unit level.
Yeah.
And it's eclipsed by the conversation about the pool, unfortunately. And I absolutely love Tyler. That's such a Princeton comment. Let's imagine the sink as the mini pool so that we can somehow tie these two scales of formal language and kind of experience together. And for me, that seems somewhat of a missed opportunity here, that comment that Tyler made, for Lynn to bring together these two scales, the site and the unit, so that they do get equal time in the presentation. I think it's a bit of a shame that we're not acknowledging all the hard work at working out those units and how they play a part in the project's development.
Thank you.
Hey, Len, I also wanted to say another thing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in this class the whole time. You're always smiling. You also have a great disposition. You are thoughtful. You're creative, and I think the creativity of this project has really been identified. And I just think it's just been fantastic. And I really am grateful that you were around this year, always kind of keeping things. I mean, there's a playfulness to this project that I think is really highly valued.
It was definitely there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's jump to Chad.
All right. Sharing my screen. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Chad Miller, and I am presenting a project titled Feel the Berm. Feel the Berm tests the resultant when a varied system of interlocking geometries are impressed upon a landform, which I will be referring to from here on out as the berm. This berm acts to make the public the most basic site condition. This initial diagram roughly codifies use types by their geometric correlate. Through the fusions, interlocks, nests, breaks, delaminations of these geometries, the program of the site becomes adjacent, conflated, and at moments distinct. And in this bottom corner, in a diagram which I've titled Berm versus Not Berm, the potential moments of public access become legible.
Hey, Chad, some people want you to go full screen. Is that doable?
Yes, sorry, I thought I was. Let's see. Is it shared full screen now?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay, sorry about that. Stripping away the diagrammatic lens, this axon bathes the forms in a similar representational style, such that the moments of programmatic intrigue can be highlighted. A few such moments might be here at 4, the public garden and pool, which sort of work to unify the programs which occur beneath it. And then here at 10, this central mediating berm, which acts as a place that the community might be able to determine the programmatic function based on need, whether that be housing for the houseless or a public market on a Saturday, for example. The plans continue to suggest these regions of programmatic interplay, such as at this moment where the temporary sheltering facilities here begin to abut against the synagogue lobby, and the conversation which occurs between these formal moves and these groups hopes to create some kind of political exchange. This next plan highlights the ways in which the public berm becomes a significant use type over the site, prompting the circulation across, through, and into new adjacencies and communities. To the side, a series of vignettes imagining the use of these berms from the exterior and at moments within the interior. Moving down, the basement produces a similar series of interrelationships in a vast sequence of interior space. The berms have now been dressed and are basking in the summer sun, envisioned with small humans, similarly utilizing the berm to catch up on some vitamin D or otherwise going about their days and interrelating amongst themselves. Next, I invite you to a drawing which I have titled Anatomy of a Berm, where we take a glance at the mortician's table as they slice and dice the berm into an array of pieces, gently exploded, which this drawing has the dual purpose of expressing the tectonic articulation and at showcasing potential alternate geometric relationships. Shifting the focus to the sectional identity of the project, this section exposes the ways in which the forms remain in some ways discrete from one another, like here with the berm and its relationship to the office space. Those are in some ways distinguishable from another, but sectionally those boundaries begin to be blurred, but not outright. So there are moments of tension between those spaces and simultaneously moments of connection. Above is a series of detailed views from the model which express these interrelationships at the roofscape, and then a detail of how the interior lighting requirements for the residential units is mediated against the massiveness of the berm via a projection of windows. Continuing in the sectional exploration, this series of 7 sections expresses different moments at which geometries are combining and interrelating to form surprising and interesting programmatic effects. And then finally, a couple of model shots from alternate views. And I'll leave you with this image from the corner of Sunset and Logan. Thank you for your attention. And then I'm going to move to the concept board.
Chad, a quick clarification. Are all of the bermed rooftops accessible from the street level? And are they all available to use as a kind of public space?
Yes, they are all fully publicly accessible. There are some moments at which the slope becomes too extreme for traversing. So those aren't accessible to anybody. They just become sort of these walls, but.
Suppose
Chad,
I'll start.
Well, Chad, I think it'd be better if you went to your PowerPoint and just moved back and forth. It just looks better.
Okay.
And let them like tell you where they want you to go, and then they have the concept board themselves.
Yes, maybe you can go to your overall massing model, the colored one. I'm just trying to understand. Are there any moment there is one moment where people are just actually walking on the ground in the inside of your project, right? And that's open to the sky, where the berm, how should I say this? That there is a kind of open space at ground level only. Is there?
Yes, in the center there is an open space that can be, maybe I'll go to the couple of these sections, particularly perhaps this one, where there's this open space which occurs at moments beneath this central mediating berm, but also.
And that open space is open to the sky, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe to Ming's question, there's that the colored bird's eye you have, I think shows that the best. Both the green, there was, I think Victor asked about that too. This one here on the right side.
Right.
It's really quite interesting, Chad. You had, similar to the last project, a compelling kind of first idea, the berm. I love landscape, so I was kind of smitten with that. But then when you move through the project, it seemed like a lot of the thought and effort went to representation and the ways in which I see this style, a lot of my colleagues are chasing similar muses, and you really grasped it. And there's a lot of facility in how you presented the project. The model is immaculate, but I wonder how much that initial kind of concept or the architectural narrative got subsumed by a certain desire to present it in a certain way. The biggest thing for me is the berm is just this chartreuse. I would love to see what it looks like with the different types of flowers and grass. Are there trees? How is it being used? Is it being used in ways you weren't intending? Are there puddles of water? Is it muddy? The specific phenomena associated with the berm has been kind of overcome by this desire to present in this really quite electric green. So I'd wonder what your opinion or just your thoughts on the way in which you've gone about this project representationally, and how that is interfaced with the architectural desires, the programmatic desires. And if you, because I have a feeling you have quite an interest in the image and how these things are presented, the model, the artifact, and how did that interface with the process? Because from my view, it seems like you kind of overcame it, and there was benefits to that. These drawings are interesting and the model is immaculate. But was the kind of architectural genius of the berm overcome?
You might want to show your renders. You have a few life moments, the corner of sunset, the vignette 1 and vignette 2.
Right.
Those are about as life that you are willing to go.
Yeah, I think I was in representing just the dynamism that I was attempting to grasp with the berm. It became a difficult provocation to create renders which express the life of humans. So I think my strategy with the chartreuse or with these white figurines, which sort of cover it in the elevations, is just to begin to assume and starting to infer what might occur rather than explicitly expressing that. But
Well, I really like your project. For a couple of reasons. I think the idea that you're playing with the notion of the berm and work and making, this is kind of turning landscape into architecture is really powerful. And I'm glad that Stephen pointed at the rendering, because the chartreuse axonometric kind of turned it into more of a cartoon of the idea. So, which from what I'm hearing from you, that really has not been the intention, because I really was hoping to say that that actually the berm is a real berm, and that people can wander and can walk up there, and it's very soft, and it's this green, or it's a meadow, and at the same time you treat it, which I think is very, very interesting, you treat it also as an artificial landscape. And by that I mean the section of your project really clearly showed that this is a really, really thin layer of landscape. And one could also read that as the building elevation, but it just happened to be a green wall with opening, with fenestration on it. So there's a double reading in it. But the fact that you are interested in having the berm being used like a park, I think is really super important for your project, right? So this rendering kind of represent the idea better than some of your other drawing from that point of view, because I like that. But I think to a certain extent, I also think that maybe your project is a little bit too fragmented, because that was the reason why I was asking, because it ended up being like you're interested in having this anatomy of all the parts, but the anatomy of all the parts also suggests that this landscape now is being highly fractured. And then to a certain extent, when it's fractured and it becomes objectified, it becomes more like building as opposed to be part of a landscape and part of the berm, and sometimes it has a crevice that open and crack in between that. So I think that the nuance between, is it a building or is it landscape? And if we start talking about landscape, then the way landscape or earth are fractured is very different than building that are cut up as chunk. I think you're somewhere in between the two, you know, like on one hand, you're really interested in this landscape, and it could also be slightly artificial because it's clearly man-made. But on the other hand, the other representation makes it look like they're all building painted green.
Hey, I think there's a lot of great things with this project. I find the presentation a little schizophrenic. It's almost like there's two projects here. There's the white project, and then there's the in living color project. And they're both wonderful, but different. And they both, for me, have different readings and different, I don't know, they send me in a different direction, each one. For the colorful pieces, the chunks, the NFT worthy graphics. I want to see those things kind of moving and animated and come to life. And to Ming's point, yeah, they're pieces and it's a collection of pieces. And when they do come together, it creates something entirely different, right? So this whole part-to-whole relationship is pretty wonderful, but I don't know, we only see it in fragments and we don't really understand it. And I don't know, I think there's something more with the way you choose to represent these projects that would take it to the next level. And I think that part of the process is something that needs to be explored to really kind of understand the project and how it has been developed, and most importantly, how you can resolve some of these issues. When you show us the white piece, everything gets abstracted and simplified, and then the whole becomes more important, I guess. But in a way, I find the fragments, the pieces, the chunks more compelling. So I don't know. I don't know if you're playing us with these two different modes of representation. For me, it's fun. It kind of works. It keeps us on our toes and guessing. But in a way that they're contrasting attitudes in how to represent, develop, grow a project. And I don't know if that's good or bad at this point, but I do think there's something really intriguing and interesting in that. And I think I guess I want to see one of those strategies developed more, and then know how that then gets resolved in the final project.
Chad, I love your project. I am immediately seduced by it. For a variety of reasons. I think the environmental implications of the green roof and it becoming public space speak to very kind of issues that I'm most important to me in my own work. I also love the way that you are this question of fragmentation or wholeness within the site design, but also relative to what that means urbanistically as it interfaces and engages its neighbors. I also think that, and this comment has more to do about where you're going and not where you are currently, meaning that next year you're going to be in thesis. And I think this question that was posed earlier by Patrick is kind of at the foundation of maybe the conversation in some ways today. And I'm so grateful to Stephen to remind us that this is fourth year undergraduate work, because we're often forgetting that over the course of this afternoon and looking at these as kind of like, you know, propositions that are going into a developer's office next week. So I'm grateful to have that constant reminder of where these projects live in your careers. But I would say that for me, I think it would be important for you to determine whether this project is a provocation versus a proposal. And I think that from the point of view of where you're going next year and what you intend to do with your thesis project in fifth year, because I think this project is a bit schizophrenic. It lives in both these worlds of like, on one hand, and I think this is true of all the projects, Kai's, Lynn's, that these projects live in a world of provocation. They're like, we're going to mess with the developer and start to focus on a particular architectural element that destabilizes the kind of mundane, prosaic nature of housing in the city. And I think that's wonderful. But I also, I think it would be helpful for everyone to begin to frame their projects more and in their verbal presentation, particularly more specifically. Are we looking at a proposal? Are we supposed to imagine this as something that is to be set into the city and built within months from now? Or is this a provocation and a way of instigating thought about those kinds of less than interesting aspects of housing? The other thing that I really love is, of course, I've said it before, is the green roof. But I would ask you to be mindful that, and it comes out of Ming's comment about the thin surface of the greenness, that both you and Lynn are talking potentially about things that are more related to ecologies and environmental systems. That the green is not just this thing, this patch of grass that you place onto the surface of a building, but has broader implications in terms of the way that it mitigates and collects water, the way that it begins to provide cooling and shade. There's so many things that I think in terms of environmental impact, both on the site and surrounding, that these projects could potentially harness and be even more impactful. And so not thinking of these as just site-specific conditions, but conditions that live within the building and the program, but also expand to the neighboring surrounding community. And the last thing is that I love the idea of this project being a bit schizophrenic, and rather in some moments I read it as purely fragmentary, and in other moments, as Patrick has pointed out, when it's white, it reads more of a kind of whole piece. But I am concerned, and it brings me back to a question that I would probably throw at both you and Kai. It's like, why are the thresholds onto the site from the public domain always at the centers of the blocks? And why are they not, if you're drawing the intersections, the pedestrian intersections on your site plan, why are you not using that information that you've consciously decided to draw as part of a way of understanding the connection between the public domain and those passageways and thresholds that take you from that public domain onto your site? And so I'm really at a loss of trying to understand how those central thresholds along those blocks actually tether or tie into some of the surrounding area. And for me, that is probably one of the most kind of perplexing things about the project currently.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything Victor just outlined, and Chad, I love your project a lot as well, and immediately reminded me of the La Brea Taprit Museum with the green slopes coming off of it, and yet it is a building, and yet it's so nice to hang out. That green slope there is always occupied with families and young children, and is such a part of the city fabric. And I think what I like about your I agree with all the criticism, but I think you intuitively understand the urban fabric and human scale and breaking down volumes to be approachable and perceived from a human, from the eye level, from us walking on it. And I think the criticism criticism was understanding maybe in a more logical way what the other, if you have all these tools, I think you can push it further and you can address a lot more issues than just a pretty shape. And we know you love that pretty shape. You have them flying out there in the sky with your breaked up explosion rendering, but to use what you know and then to address problems or challenges in the city, I think would make this like really, truly super outstanding for me.
Thank you. Oh, Tyler, you go.
Just a quick comment. I mean, looking at, again, at the model, a closer read, your moments of intensity, I think, are really quite powerful. And there's this question of how can you tie these disparate things together. I think you already have in these moments of intensity, and it's, I guess the criticism or the thing that I'd encourage would be to look to, in the same way that the renderings were already there to answer the first question. I think these moments of intensity also answer some other questions, and being able to we create these projects, but I think we also need to be able to go back and then look at them with a kind of fresh set of eyes, and try to simulate the experience on that berm. Would you be walking up it? Would you sit? Because you picked out these moments of intensities, which for me, I think really crystallize some of your ideas. You have the berm with its thinness. You have an element poking through, a shaft going in. You have everything is just contained in this vignette. So I think that that's a mode of representation and just a way of thinking, putting yourself in the visitors or the viewers' shoes, and then presenting that again to us, say, oh, look what I found and something I made, and simulating the experience we're having as we see, and we're discovering all these quite beautiful moments ourselves. So just perhaps a strategy to try out in the future.
That's a great point to Chad. Hey, Chad, can you just somehow show your low-rise berm? Is it possible to get that out there in the world just to have a conversation? So I don't know if you guys see this, but that's Eric Garcetti's house. And so his competition entry to low rise was to take the 20-foot green space, not on Garcetti's house, but actually like the eminent domain as part of the street, and turn that into a berm and build in a building underneath it for the homeless. And basically to put into the city the opportunity to use in fancier neighborhoods that would never have these kind of homeless communities, actually communities using in space that actually even exists, and say, hey, Eric, instead of just telling us that we have to locate homeless people and affordable housing in TOC neighborhoods in highly dense areas, what about your neighborhood? What about the green spaces of the hills? It was a really interesting provocation that kind of evolved into the project that he's working on. So I think maybe to answer also to Sylvia's question, I think there's a politic embedded in this, which is quite substantive. I would say, Chad, your mid-review came off maybe more clearly because it was more clear. As beautiful and as amazing this project is, and it's absolutely one of my favorites, probably all time, it got slightly overwrought with your exquisite design skill, particularly how I feel like you filled in the berm in the inside. You used to have a big open space, which seemed much more usable in some ways for different kind of possibilities and made the shape clearer. Little things like that. Some people love that kind of the breakdown, the schizophrenic areas, which is really an inappropriate word for that, but like for different kind of adjacencies of cool little objects. And I think you're so talented, and it's such a great project. And I obviously I commend you for it. It's just then the politic, the conversation that everyone like Ming and myself are always looking for. Where are the people? Where are the people enjoying that berm and using that public space that you put forward in a place that typically would never get that, for a location that really could use it, and actually making a space in the middle for gathering and for community engagement and activism. It really was it's so powerful on that level. So again, I applaud you, and I love the critic commentary. It was great to hear you working through this project. Thank you. I don't know if Pavel wants to say anything last, but we need to also move to Karan. We're good.
Wonderful project. I mean, you said everything. Thank you for bringing the one for the low rise. This actually explains the project in context.
Thank you all for the comments. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you. Great work. One last project. Thank you for hanging in there to the end. All you, Karan.
Hi, my name is Karan. I want to thank you all for coming to the review. And this is distributed aggregation. Distributed aggregation attempts to create a relationship between aggregated forms that are used as designated program spaces and voids that are used as open social spaces. By providing these voids, the project attempts to form a balance between different programs and the shared spaces between them. So just to give you an overview of how this proposal came to be, it was developed as a result of the past projects we worked in LA Metro. So the first one, the low-rise competition project, used the concept of a shared roof, creating social spaces underneath to increase community engagement. And the form finding exercise helped me to explore the idea of aggregated forms on the site. And together these ideas kind of merged and formed the idea for the big one, the big project. So in terms of site strategy, the project has clear axes of circulation here and from all sides, and then attempt to make the site as inclusive and welcoming as possible. For the ground floor plan, the site was divided into different forms based on the program and the social spaces created in between. So on the Sunset side, you have the office and the retail/commercial space. And as you dwell deeper into the site, you have more of the housing program. And just for the ground floor plan, they're all kind of, I would say, isolated into these kind of 6 different forms. But as we go, yeah, for the upper level floor plans, the programs gradually start to merge together. And they share social and amenity spaces. And wherever you might be in the project, what location, you would have visual access to one of the courtyard spaces formed between these different forms. This type of aggregation opens up a lot of space on the ground floor and introduces a lot of connections between these previously separate buildings. This section shows the relationship between office and retail space on the Sunset side, and also the entrance here. So it's kind of it makes you curious when to go inside this arc. For the building skins, the project uses a layer of perforated stainless steel in order to form a balance between light, shadow, and transparency. This material also helps in boosting energy efficiency because it will reduce the intake of heat radiation in the summer and insulate interior spaces during the winter. So that's the Sunset side, where along with the stainless steel panels, you also have a layer of these curved perforated metal screen, which kind of opens the retail side on the ground floor and kind of makes it more translucent as you go up. And these are some more elevations from Logan Street and Montana. This axon showcases a chunk from the Sunset side. So on the rooftop, there's a restaurant for the public, creating a social space for the inhabitants of the project as well. And this vignette of the skin shows how it's structured along, like how the different kind of skins come together. That's a closer render of the rooftop restaurant. Skin. The open plaza is centralized in its location on the site and is supposed to act as a catalyst for the gathering of different types of users and promote community engagement. It can also be used as a flexible event space, and with the help of this retractable canopy, the space's lighting features can be changed dramatically according to the desired effect. And I just close off with these two kind of snapshots of the overall project. And yeah, that's it for my presentation. Thank you. Let me know if you want me to go back on a specific slide.
Just a quick question for clarification. The materials are not paired or are paired with the programmatic functions of the project?
So it's uniform in the sense, like on the elevations, they're all kind of stainless steel panels, and on the roof, it's more of a mix of concrete and stainless steel. Yes.
There's no direct rapport between the program and the materiality. There's more to do about facade versus horizontal plane.
Well, like mostly on the edge conditions, it's mostly on the corners of the forms. It's mostly public program. So even in the housing parts, it's like a lot of amenity spaces and shared spaces. So yeah, it's more about public versus private.
You have like a concept board also, or
Yeah, I
you
can
can see it all together.
Yeah.
Is there, you chose to show a lot of the views in black and white and omit the materiality, like the two big bird's eye views.
Yeah, I just
Was that, yeah.
Sorry, just for the bird eye views, I kind of wanted to focus on the, like, kind of wanted to do a spatial study. So kind of wanted to focus on the aggregation and the spaces from because of the voids. So went with that black and white graphic choice, I guess.
And is that sunset is on the left bottom? So that's like on the lower one. Is that like noon sun, or you know what I mean? Is that, which time of the day is that?
Yes, I think it's afternoonish.
So sunset is on the right bottom.
On the lower one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no, sunset's on the left and Echo Park's on the right.
Mm-hmm. So I thought.
Karan, you were talking about your project is based on, aggregation, and I was looking at I was looking at your board, and I was wondering, the distributed aggregation, that's what was that what drove you to end up having the massing that you have for this project, or was this just a different exercise?
No, yeah, that was the exercise I was talking about. So that kind of drove the form for this project.
So this eventually gave you the form for your project.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking that question is, I could see that a little bit in the overall massing, but then when you began presenting your project, in particularly the plan of showing all of the different housing unit and things like that, which is, it's like aggregation is like the perfect formal language to do when you have a lot of small unit like room and housing to work with, and it just I just don't see that being represented in your in your design about how you use that process to derive to your project, because the plan shows all of the room, but they all flank against the perimeter of the larger rectangle shape, but it doesn't really reflect the idea of aggregation. So that would be my first comment is I like the project when you start describing it, but I'm having difficulty with following through how the process help you come up with the overall form, as well as how it is being manifested all throughout the project.
Ron, you bring up a really interesting point, which is that we often forget that Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is still on the quarter system. And I think one of the things as Ming is talking about, this idea of aggregation playing its way out throughout the kind of all aspects of the project and not seeing it, I think it's symptomatic of the fact that, one, I want to commend you. I think it's amazing. And I'm still a little bit floored that you guys are doing so much in such a tiny breadth of time. But I think it's really nice to see the kind of development of the units and to understand at this kind of one-to-one scale of the unit development, and then also start to really propose a very kind of assertive and clear siting strategy. And I think maybe this question that's being put forth by Ming is that there are two scales of investigation, of design investigation in this project. There is the site, and then there is the unit. And I think there is a middle intermediate scale that has yet to reach full development, where maybe the issue of aggregation belongs more to unit and unit repetition and unit development, more so than it does to the actual site strategy itself. And because when I look at your project, the thing that I absolutely fall in love with, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to be a great architect, is that southeast corner with that like kind of chamfered triangle cut off the tip on the corner. And the idea that I'm looking at these, and we haven't talked a lot about this today, but the idea that is there a building type that is the genesis for the way you're thinking about the project. And for me, the lower half of your site design speaks to a kind of articulated bar scheme. And I see these kind of snaky bars that somehow have been manipulated to provide for outdoor public space or to start to produce aperture, like on that southeast corner. And I'm just in love with it. I think the north speaks to this friction between unit development aggregation and how do I put it on the site. And so for me, that it's probably more a question of time and resolution than it is perhaps about an attitude or and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I would just say that because maybe the other guests would have something to add to that conversation that I can't seem to be able to piece these two realms of investigation together quite yet. I can only tell you the things I love, but I can't seem to find the conduit that brings them together yet.
One thing I enjoy or love about the project is the section. I think there's some subtlety there that's quite nuanced and sophisticated. And, you know, maybe this is a project that's acquired a project, and it's more, it has to do more with like these subtle nuances, right? I guess where I am a little confused or have questions is where the renders you show us give us a sense of the project being almost like a series of solids and voids, right? Like you want the thing to read like a solid, you want the mass to be articulated like a chunk, right? And then when you show us these renders, you show us like these stick buildings that are kind of the opposite, right? And then the housing by nature needs openable windows and certain size windows and egress windows, and it's a bunch of windows, right? And you're showing it as a solid. So that's an interesting problem, right? Like, how do I do that? How do I make a building that needs to be porous, that has to have all these openings? How do I make it solid? And you do that with a screen, which you show in a little snippet, right? So I want to know, how does that screen give you the solidity that you aspire to, right? Like, how do you do that? And that's an interesting problem. And that's what would make your project even more, I think, successful and sophisticated and quiet and nuanced. And it's there, I can see it, but like the presentation just needs a little bit more information to sell us on it. And Karan, I would urge you to do that, because I do think it's a wonderful project, but it just needs it needs a section. It needs a wall section, a building section, a wall section, a detail section, something that brings it from the abstract to a little bit more convincing way of explaining the project and telling your story. And I think that would probably do it. But overall, I think it's a successful project.
Yeah, I like you naming it subtle or nuanced. I think that's the beautiful. I think that's a beautiful aspect of this project, and it has these almost like medieval kind of European courtyard spaces we all love to go to in Italy everywhere. And it seems very human scale, inhabitable, kind of as an overall shape, how the block was broken down. And you're right, it only works because those are solids, and then and the voids in between. And just to explain how you can keep this in the design development in the wall section would probably resolve a lot of those issues and answer the questions we have.
I'd like to kind of reiterate some of the comments. I think your massing, Karan, is really quite interesting. Nuance, again, is the word, especially your elevations. I wish they would larger in your presentation, especially that sunset elevation with the Corbusian window, ribbon window, just overtakes the whole thing. And then how does that sit on top of this Boolean vocabulary, which is a much more contemporary feeling? So I think there was a lot of thought that went into the kind of attenuation of the masses from an exterior perspective. But I do completely agree with Ming that I think the plan and there was really like so much time went into the massing that I think that the plans were left a little to the wayside. So perhaps just as a suggestion of sorts in the next project and moving forward, when you have this interest in the massing and when you're working at a certain scale, try to then add another ingredient into that. So you're not just making these formal moves, but you're thinking also about the way in which that can break down. And perhaps let go of the notion of aggregation, which you aggregated, but there was much more of an array. There was an array along an edge. I think that there's other modes of situating and even designing the units that are inherent in your massing strategy, which was so well articulated and has nuance and a lot of potential. I think we can all agree on that. And then trying to rethink the unit through the lens, which has already been established. It's almost a way of designing from the exterior in, as opposed to these kind of parallel paths of, oh, I've come up with a great little unit I'd love to live in. I've come up with a building I'd love to walk by, drive by, and take a picture in front of. But delving into a kind of singular design process in which you don't come to this end product in which certain aspects of the project have such strength and other ones are kind of left in the shadow of your massing, which is really quite powerful.
No, I think you know, I really like what you just say, Tyler, because as I'm looking at the overall massing model, I mean, if you take into what Victor was pointing at about the 2-bar building, you know, with the corner, there are 2 different scales to the project. And then if we begin looking at the overall massing and designing from the outside in, like you suggest, I could easily imagine that those 2-bar buildings could be for housing because they're smaller units, right? And then the other 2 larger block light could be something else, could be for public, commercial, different kind of social activity. And then that begins to articulate your project very, very differently, because right now the way the program is being distributed in the project is kind of uniformly distributed bottoms up, from ground up, as opposed to understanding the overall massing and taking advantage of that to create different area. So when Sylvia is talking about the medieval aspect of the project, those courtyards are different because the courtyard where the housing are, where the smaller units are, would be very intimate and very different from the courtyard facing the public program, for example. So the project itself, if you look at the massing, is very rich. It's how it gets developed. How do you begin to develop it is you could take advantage of that.
Yes, and 100% would be very different how you feel in maybe almost a similar space. And also I think just being conscious of what the sun does throughout the day in a building like this, and where is the light and where's the shade and where's the heat, you know, I think could inform those decisions as well. I really like how the light plays off of these 2 black and white and gray bird's eye views, but to study how does it look in the morning, how does it look in the middle of a day, and what does an evening look like, I think would be really interesting, and then use those discoveries to develop the project further.
Hey, I'm going to jump in and say thank you to all our reviewers for their hard work today critiquing our students. We really appreciate your time. Very, very grateful. Karan, I think you got a really terrific review from this group. I think you managed yourself well at the low-rise competition scale of real kind of thinking of housing. It's really quite elegant there. And then you did really actually come up with some nice thinking on the urbanistic scale. And I guess it's really a connection between the 2. That's something to work on as you develop. It's you know, there are massive scales of difference, and you're working to try to connect the 2. And I think you got some great advice from the team on how to focus that and how to, I mean, as pointed out, obviously this is an enormous project, right? And then as I guess Victor's comment too, like the developer, walking into the developer's office with some of them all set and ready to go, as if, you know, and it's kind of a funny thing to ask someone, you know, a 20-year-old to on their own in 20 weeks, really less because we lose so much to other things we do, come up with this much work and achieve at this level. So I don't know.
I think it's really
pretty
impressive.
grateful.
It's so impressive. I forgot about the quarterly system. I actually, when the first the project were being presented, you know, I go to first project, second project, and I keep on thinking this is a 2-semester long project, because it was so well developed, and the ambition of the project when you start describing how big it is, and the resolution of the design in terms of what they've been thinking about was really very, very impressive. So I want to congratulate you all on this. It's excellent work.
Thank you, Ming.
I'd also like to second that. I mean, the rigor displayed, I think, is really quite powerful. As you all move forward, you'll find that that's really the deciding factor, is how invested you get. And I can see from all the projects that you really took this seriously and, you know, dove head first. And I think the results speak for themselves. So, I mean, keep that passion up for thesis, because you're definitely going to need it. So there's plenty on display today, and it was really a joy to see.
Yeah, completely. I'm actually also blown away that this is a quarterly project.
Well, we should say it's 2 quarters, right? So it's 20 weeks. It's 20 weeks. I mean, they only spent the first 4 weeks we spent on low rise, and then the next 3 weeks we spent on the 3D model exercise, but then we began the program. So
right, but that's a really short amount of, it's like, I don't know if I could do it in that time frame. So congratulations.
Okay, great. Hey, thank you all. And thank you for spending some time with us on your Friday. And the students, if you could hang for a second, Pavel, if you have time too, that's great. And the rest of, enjoy your weekends and enjoy your summer. And we're finally catching up. Everyone's been on summer vacation. We just are getting there.
Yeah, you're a little bit behind us, Stephen.
I know. You guys, you went on summer vacation in April, right?
Yes, yes. End of April was, you know, a month ago.
I know.
Thanks, everybody. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Ming. Thank you, Sylvia.
Bye-bye, Pavel.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Victor.
All right, let's have just a short chat. I know not everyone's here. Not everyone hung in there, huh? Well, it's good to see everybody's face all at once. Is this our full group? I think there's more. Yeah, there we go. They keep coming. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'll let you, Kate's driving. Are you in the car? That was very impressive. Obviously, you get that. And I know we push you really hard. But at the same time, hopefully we didn't push too hard and kept it reasonable. I'm grateful. I had such an amazing experience. And as much as I'm tired of Zoom, as much as you are, I think we did as much as we could with it. And the work clearly showed that the format still can happen. And you can still all produce amazing work, which I just want to remind you over and over and over again. You don't see anything outside of Cal Poly too often, because you haven't really started getting out there to see all the different schools and what they produce in live. Your level of attainment is so tremendous. It's sometimes you can see it scares the critics. They're like, oh my goodness. Because they know they can't do that either. We would get lost in so many other things before we could ever produce the amount of work you guys produce, and to do it so well and creatively with so much enthusiasm. So please just congrats. Keep going in the world and doing stuff. Always stay in touch. It's always great to hear from you. When you need those recommendations, just ask. It's always something that we give, and we support you. And you saw a lot of our Cal Poly LA Metro team out there in the reviews. It's fun to bring them back. They're all achieving amazing things. You guys have this incredible network. Cal Poly is a huge network, and we're like a little small subset of that, but everyone's supportive. So I have a fantasy that one day, like I think Tom Wiscombe used to joke that we were creating an army here. I just would one day wish you'd all just go into business together and just make a 100-person Cal Poly LA Metro team. And, you know, don't include us. We can just give you advice on the side or something. We'll all be in retirement enjoying it on a beach somewhere. And you just like show everyone, you know. So impressive. Thank you.
I cannot top this one. Thank you very much. Again, it's been really a pleasure. This year had its challenges, of course, but there's something which I really liked. I will not say the negatives. I mean, obviously, we're not in Los Angeles and we couldn't go to visit sites and you couldn't see some of the schools, as Steven said, but there are some positive things. One of them is that during a critique, you can attend all of your colleagues' critiques. I'm speaking for a regular review, which is very difficult in any other format, just to hang around. Here you can eavesdrop and listen, and some of you are doing it, and I think this benefits the people who are listening this critique. The other thing is that actually we can, Steven was saying, we're going national on getting our reviewers. We actually were going, I think, international. There were people from Bartlett, right? We can, next year, hopefully we're gonna go intergalactic or something. But that one is, is definitely a plus because we get opinion from everyone. And also, something which is more related to our other class, that way you project the image of Cal Poly. And don't forget that this is very important. Whenever you go, I mean, it doesn't matter to get your own project or to get somewhere a job. When the people hear Cal Poly or hear the school which you're coming from, it makes a difference. So the more they hear about Cal Poly, on more places they hear about Cal Poly, the more you all benefit. So think about it that way. It's the people who come after you, people who before you, as you can see some of the wonderful students who have been actually part of this program, and they're so in the terms of this, yes, this is the narrow. I mean, the bigger the university becomes, and the more important is the surrounding circle around us. And this is the peers in which you're going to be growing, the peer group in which you're going to be growing. So there might be a competition between, which is good, but let's be like competition like the Beatles. I mean, nurturing from each other and listening from each other, because that is the generation, and you have a different problem, different issues, different challenges than we are having, and we are not that old even, right? So I think that keep this this interaction between yourself and grow as an army. I rather prefer to, instead of having one big 100 people Caliporum forum, we have 100 derivative of Caliporum, and all of you have your own firms, all of you having all your successful business, and we do hear from each other. But this is a matter of strategy. I will not, this is something to work out with Steven, but the idea is the same, that I'm looking back and all of these students who have done it's a wonderful job. I also like this year's scope of the studio, not because the program was super important, what it was. It's a kind of a more graspable, and it gives more diversity in the terms of when you're doing the high rise, which we have done. We have tried with the school. I think that is one of the most successful programs which we have given to you. There are a lot of things to analyze with Steven about the methodology and everything, and he's taking the lead of this, of course. But that one is, I think,
it couldn't happen without you, Pavel. Come on. Yeah. Those drawings were gorgeous, and we all know you were behind a lot of that. No, I mean, the students have the talent. They have questions, and you have knowledge that no one in our field has.
Yeah.
So
thank you for the kind of. I really regret. Usually, the practice class is much more visit and site oriented, and I have to, speak all of these hours, and I hope that you are bearing with my accent there. But hopefully, if you guys come in town, and if you stay around, we can do some of this visit on informal base and grab a cup of coffee and talk about architecture, which, from the people who know me, I'm very open to do pretty much always. So thank you once again. You make us look good also. extremely good. You know, maybe they're gonna
Yes.
fire me from SciAc because Ming just saw it. You know, just like why are not?
Nah.
teaching?
Yeah,
No.
why are you doing these great projects with Cal Poly? They're our competitor.
I don't
Yeah.
teach. I don't teach design studio on SciAc. I have told them I don't teach design studio. I don't teach. I think just seminars which are core, indispensable seminars, nothing else.
Ming taught, I think, like 19 years at Cal Poly Pomona before she went to SciArc. So, you know, I think she's a Cal Poly supporter.
She's a couple. She's not director anymore. She's a big,
Nah.
huge part of SciAc. Huge. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very successful career. I mean, also there is a thing for the practice that you guys are studying there, and just look at this firm and learn from these firms and what they have achieved. That's also important. Anyhow, I'm talking too much. Steve, back to you.
I'm done too. It's been a long week. Exhibition people who I'll see you in LA. Anybody who's going to make it to LA, please do. If you can't, you know, enjoy your summers. I mean, just really go enjoy those things. We actually have all your work on concept board, so in a way, I don't need anything else from you, except if you have, not even your models, you photograph them for your concept board. It makes it so much easier, let me tell you. You know, we used to always have to ask you for that CD, and then I wouldn't give grades if you didn't write your CD, and then it's like, you know, it's like this constant threat for this one annoying thing that I don't need to ask that anymore. Love the concept board. You know, I'll see some of you soon. I think we should probably maybe meet in the early afternoon as opposed to the bright early morning, but that's just me. I'm trying to work out the key stuff with Angela right now. So that's gonna keep me going a little bit. And everybody else, hopefully I'll see you live the 17th. If you wanna go, I'll email everybody because we have to RSVP live on the 17th as well. I'm sorry, on the 19th. And otherwise, you know, just say hi to me, by the way, when you see me in reality. Because, you know, you're going to be like super tall or maybe a different size than I thought you were. There's going to be something I'm not going to necessarily be like, oh, hey, you know, and you're towering over me. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that, you know, or whatever it might be. So thank you. You guys did it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
guys.
Pavel.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Go enjoy yourselves.
Stephen,
Yes.
can I just have a word with you after, real quick?
Yes. All right.
And Chad too, maybe.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go pick up the stuff from ARC soon here. Is there anything like I need to know or?
No, call me. You've got my text. Call me if there's an issue. The only issue we have is I don't think we're going to get into the Helms tonight. So the question is, do you have somewhere safe to put it? Don't leave it in the truck or car. Don't drop it.
Yeah, I'll bring it inside.
Okay, and put it nice and safely somewhere, maybe stacked as opposed to leaning up against a wall or something.
Yeah.
Okay, just so nothing goes wrong. That would be great.
Yeah.
And then I'll be back in touch. I have to work out the key thing and organize to meet. Also, it might be nice to know about how much we have even. I don't know how much they even printed because they were very confused by our requests. And then I guess I'll be more on top of everything tomorrow. I just don't think I'm going to get much more done today.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen, I wanted to let you know I'll be in LA on Monday, but I won't be able to make it until Monday. So I'll be there by Monday, probably around.
That's fine. We're going to do the best we can over the weekend. It'll really be an organization. I'll try to get a few things started. Maybe the labels got printed, but I doubt it. So I'm not sure what we even have, and we'll probably begin to figure out troubleshoot all our problems, how we're going to mount these things on walls. We've got like 30 firms obsessing about like all their models and their drawings, which drawing they need pulled because they printed it wrong and all that. I mean, it's unbelievable the quantity of emails. I have been like getting the most amazing kind of like impolite admin oriented emails from so many people because each firm has like 5 people they've assigned to somehow mass email all these things. And I'm apparently the administrator in charge. I'm the administrative assistant in charge of all things, everything. And I just get these emails like, could you please send us this information? We need this by tomorrow. I'm like,
like, whoa. Well,
I'm like,
also, I'm coming from SLO, so if you need anything from SLO, please let me know.
When are you coming down from SLO?
I believe I'm gonna leave on Monday at noon is my plan.
Okay, touch base with Elliot here, because we have a shipment of stuff of my things coming down with Liam and hopefully Alex Fu. And I don't know if some hang up might happen in that process that might need someone attentive to carry a nice box in a clean car as opposed to shove it in a.
Yeah, I mean, if Liam can't take it, I absolutely
Liam's not coming down yet until like the 16th or something. So Alex is supposed to do it, but we kind of, I think he's coming on Sunday, right, Elliot? I don't know.
He said he's coming on the 13th, which would be Sunday, yeah.
Or yeah, so if you need it on Monday though, and if that doesn't work out, please let me know.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice to have a backup or if something didn't get printed in time. Great, okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Is Varun, Adi, and Gabriel here? Or is just their picture? Is just their?
They're just not on Zoom. They're not at the Zoom.
They're not there. Yeah, they're just not there. It's okay. All right.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I get all the stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and try to enjoy.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Take some time.
It was a great year.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great year actually. It was surprisingly great, all considering. Right.
You got through it, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Ciao. Bye. Have a good night. Oh, Ellie, did you have more questions?
I have.
No, you're good. Yeah, Chad has a question. Yeah.
Yes. Are the labels ready for printing? Or have they been submitted? I think all the content has been.
I asked for some minor correction. I don't know if it was even bothered with. It was like there was an alignment issue that I found kind of annoying. Like it would indent one for the mix used, and then when you went to the second line, you came in further like a letter. So I would have pushed the letter over. But that was, it was so minor because you were so consistent on the board with that one choice. And I don't know why you made that choice, but it's just.
Yeah, I think it's like if a space was added, it was making it worse.
Okay, so you guys decide what you needed to do, and it was all consistent, so it looked fine. I would say print it because we're going to print an extra board on Monday or something, or even Tuesday, based on all the accidents and all the things we said wrong and people pulling their projects incorrectly or getting mad at us. Did we change the undisclosed confidential thing? I don't know if you guys got that.
Alex is working on that, but I can change those things and send it over.
Yeah, that was just there was 4 of us who didn't want to say who our client was. Someone used the word undisclosed, someone used the word confidential, and someone I don't know, like Neil said some other strange word. I thought it was best that they all just simply say confidential, if we're even going to bother to put that on there. But yeah, confident. It's actually confidential because it's nice to know that they're real. All right, so that was the only thing that needed changing. I think there was 4 of those. And then yes, go ahead and try to get them printed. I don't know if they got printed in time, obviously. If we don't have them till Monday, or even we'll be on their backs from now on out. When they wake up, when they wake up on Monday, we'll just be like, all right, yeah, more things to worry about. We still have, we have so many things to think about. Oh, great, thank you, great work. Oh, stellar.